Good morning, everyone. My name is Senuri Aponso, and today I'll be talking about the real consequences of unconscious bias. So I'm going to begin by telling you a riddle. A father and a son are in a car crash that kills the father. The son is rushed to the hospital, but just as he's about to undergo surgery, the surgeon says, "I can't operate. This boy is my son." How is this possible? When I heard this riddle for the first time, I was immediately puzzled. After a few moments of contemplation, I was quite sure of my answer. The surgeon was the boy's second father. To my surprise, I was incorrect. There was a simpler explanation. The surgeon was the boy's mother. When researchers posed this question to students at Boston University, only 14% of students answered correctly. Others came up with more complex, alternate explanations, suggesting that the surgeon was the boy's stepfather or adopted parent. Why were people unable to picture a female surgeon? The reason may be implicit biases, subtle but deep-set cognitive processes that cause us to make biased judgments. Unlike explicit biases, which people deliberately think about and report, implicit biases occur outside of our conscious awareness and control. Similar to explicit biases, implicit biases can develop in a very short period of time. They have been observed in children as young as 6 years of age. Parents can also influence bias formation, as children who identify more with their parents are more likely to acquire their biases. Bias formation is also related to culture and life experiences. Exposure to different situations can influence the extent of bias formation. So, implicit biases are difficult to measure because they occur outside of our conscious awareness. One way to measure implicit biases is using an implicit association test, where participants are asked to quickly categorize words and pictures using one of two response keys. The twist is that each response key consists of two concepts, for example, African American and good. If a participant has an implicit racial bias, they may strongly associate the concepts African American and bad. This participant will be faster and more accurate at categorizing a photo when African American and bad share a response key than when African American and good share a response key. So, unlike surveys and other self-report measures, participants usually cannot fake their implicit association test scores. So, implicit biases can have harmful effects, especially when they're held by people in positions of power. When hiring managers are asked if they're biased, they often report that they're not. But when researchers conducted implicit association tests on Swedish hiring managers, the managers were more likely to associate Arab Muslim men with incompetence, laziness, and inefficiency than with productivity, ambition, and efficiency. Managers' implicit biases led them to interview more applicants with Swedish-sounding names than with Arab Muslim names. Police officers are also people in positions of power. When police officers are armed, their implicit biases can have dangerous consequences. Researchers at the University of Colorado studied students' decisions to shoot or not shoot at individuals in a video game. Participants were instructed to shoot if the target was armed. Participants made faster and less accurate decisions to shoot armed African American targets than white targets. In this case, ambiguous behavior made by African American targets were associated with threat and hostility. So it is apparent that implicit biases can have harmful and even life-threatening consequences, but research has shown that implicit biases can be decreased. For example, students enrolled in a prejudice and conflict seminar had significantly decreased implicit biases. When they processed counter-stereotype information, their biases decreased. Sleep training can also be used to decrease biases. Counter-stereotype information could be paired with sound cues that are presented to participants while they sleep. This pairing could fortify and maintain the decrease in biases for a week after the initial training session. In the meantime, we can avoid using biases by recognizing their role and existence in decision-making. We can explore the thought process that led us to make certain decisions and reduce ambiguity in stressful situations. So take the time to explore your own biases and educate others about their presence. After all, by shining a light on implicit biases, we can reduce the very real consequences. Thank you.